So it'll work. So tonight, I want to start by thanking Lou McCreary for coming from Boston. All the way from Boston. You should see Boston. It really is. And thank Hallie, and Jason, who are going to help me out tonight with Flannery O'Connor. We're going to assume that not everybody got a chance to do all the reading. How about that for euphemistic? Thank you very much. And so what I have in mind and what we planned is I'm going to start with, there were two stories. I'm a Flannery O'Connor freak, and so are these guys, and so no apologies after that from me. We're just devotees of the word. What I want to do is start with a brief introduction to Good Country People, which is the story that I said, don't read this. If you only read one, don't read this one. And we're going to do basically just an intro to it, Brian. And then we're going to segue into A Good Man is Hard to Find. You probably noticed that both titles have the word good in them, and both titles are platitudinous, which is what she's talking about here. And what we want to do is, I'm going to get this thing started, give you background, and set the situation, the story, set up the story for you. So even if you haven't read it, at least you have an idea of it. And I'm going to turn it over to Hallie, sorry, I'm married to Holly.
It's okay.
Hallie and Jason, and they're going to turn it over to Lou. And so what we want to do is go from Good Man is Hard to Find. Bessie Smith changed that around. Do you know about? Remember Bessie Smith, the blues singer? She turned it into a Hard Man is Hard to Find. But we're going to go from there into Lou's guy, minus man, who's a serious creepy pee-pee. So here we go. The Good Country People was written in the early 50s. And Good Country People was Flannery O'Connor's favorite of all her stories. My favorite of all her stories, too. Not that that matters, but she wrote it fastest of any story she ever wrote. Good Man is Hard to Find took something like a year and a half. Good Country People, she just sat down and wrote it. And I think I know why, having read all her letters, all her essays, all her everything, many times. I think because the situation is a real mirror of her and her mom's situation. Don't you? I mean, really. O'Connor, here she is. She's on crutches because she had lupus, which is an autoimmune, and Jason could tell you more about it than I can, an autoimmune disease that I just learned from Jason earlier is hereditary, usually only in women, or mostly in women. Yes?
Killed her father, right?
Killed her father. Who said that? Way to go, Jane. Yeah, her father was in the 82nd Airborne Division. My alma mater. Yeah, so she died when she was 39, and it was a very, very sad thing for 1964. It was a sad thing for anybody who had already been reading her. And she was prolific, and anyway, that's enough of her. I hope that there's stuff about her, biographical stuff, will creep into this. Good Country People is a story of a young woman, a 32-year-old woman, who lives in rural Georgia in the early 50s, imagine that, who has a degree, PhD in philosophy, and lives with her mom, and has a heart condition, and has a prosthetic leg. These are important things. They were important things. Her mom and Mrs. Freeman, who lives with her mom, who spends a lot of time with her mom, who's the wife of the tenant farmer, are people with a genius for platitudes, for some really, really stupid platitudes. I mean, stuff that is really, and Joy, the daughter, whose leg was shot off in a hunting accident. You're allowed to laugh at that. I did. I'll make a confession here, but I need to go quicker than I am going. When I first read this story out loud to a class, I was laughing so hard I couldn't finish it. I could not finish it. I mean, this one woman has 2 daughters named Glynis and Caramay. And what's her name? Joy calls them Glycerin and Caramel. And Caramel had a star in her eye. And her husband's a chiropractor. And he laid her down in the back seat of the car. It worked on her, and the star was gone. And so you can hear Joy, who changed her name when she was 21, leaving it to Hawken. Because it sounded like the broad gray side of a battleship. She stumps around the house all the time. She hates her situation. She hates everything about it. And she hates the people. She hates her mom. She hates the people. And she's an arrogant B word. Okay. Then a traveling Bible salesman shows up at the house. His name is Manly Pointer. And she, who's saying Hulda, she's Hulda now, decides that she is going to walk in the woods with this guy and bring him up to her level of understanding of the world. And so they set off into the fields.
She's an atheist, by the way.
Yes. And he's a Bible salesman.
Right.
This thing is fraught with irony. But anyway, they head out for a picnic. She forgets to bring food. He brings a valise. And she said, you don't need the Bible with you on this picnic. We're going to a hayloft in the barn near here. And well, yeah, so this is a trailer. So somebody who's read it, tell me what her intentions were when she took this young fellow to the barn. Jamie.
So she wants to seduce him. She's 30. She's told him she's 17. She finally says, I'm 30 and I've got a couple degrees. And his great line is, I don't care what you do.
Do you love me or don't you?
Yeah.
You gotta say it.
Right.
She says, well, in a way I do, but in another way I don't. You protect it. And so he finally says, she says, yes, I love you. And he says, prove it. And ladies, you probably heard that line. And she says, okay, how? And he says,
Show me your leg.
show me where your leg joins on. The upshot of the whole thing is that she thinks that she was going to seduce him, that he would be overwhelmed by remorse. She would take him into her palm and recreate him, resurrect him.
He would become nothing.
He would become nothing like she believed. And he says, well, and he opens his valise, and then there's a deck of cards with obscene pictures on it, a flask, and what was the other thing?
Prophylactic.
Suspension of disease only. I said, okay, let's get to it here. You don't believe in nothing. And she said, what do you mean? You believe you're a Christian. You're a good Christian. I hope you don't think I believe that crap. I said Bibles, but that doesn't mean I'm not from nowhere. Takes her leg off. She gets him. It's almost obscene to her at first, but she lets him take it off and put it back on, and take it off again. And then he pushes it over to the side and says, "Okay, let's have fun." Takes her glasses, and she can't believe he's doing this. And he finally, when he finally realizes that she's not going to play games, he takes her leg and puts it in his valise and leaves with it. And as he's going down the ladder, he said, "I got a woman's glass eye like this. You think you don't believe in nothing." And so, and at the very end, and Robert Giroux added this ending. Do you know that? The two platitude ladies are standing out in the field. There goes that nice country people boy there. With her leg. Yeah, so that's Good Country People. I hope you read it. But our focus tonight is on A Good Man Is Hard to Find. And again, rural Georgia, early 50s. And it helps us to make an effort to imagine rural Georgia in the early 50s. I mean, I was at Fort Benning in the mid-60s, and I remember seeing, I'm from Maryland, and Virginia, I'd never seen anything so cruel and so crude and so racist as what I saw down there. And bigoted and backward, and I don't mind saying it. It surprised the heck out of me. But anyway, we have a grandmother. The grandmother's not named, she's the grandmother. And we have a son, Bailey, and we have a daughter who is not named, daughter-in-law who is not named, but whose face is as broad and innocent as a cabbage. And she has a little baby in her arms. And there are two children, John Wesley and June Starr. June Starr, who has naturally curly hair. And grandmother, and the plan is that they're going to go to Florida for a vacation. Leave Atlanta and go to Florida for a vacation. Grandmother doesn't want to go to Florida. Grandmother wants to go to Tennessee and talk and catch up with some of her connections. So she's trying to do everything she can to get Bailey, her son, the driver, to change his mind. And the opening scene, they're in the living room, I think, in the house or someplace, reading the paper. Kids on the floor with the funny papers. And grandmother, is waving a newspaper. And she said, "You look what it says here. There's this man called the Misfit who's aloof in the woods. And he's here in Georgia. We can't take your children on these roads going south to Florida. We should go to Tennessee." And Bailey's not listening to her, paying attention to her. So they end up in the car, and she didn't get her way. They're in the car, and she's written down the mileage, so she knows it. And she's also made sure she's very well dressed, because if there's an accident and she's found dead on the road, people know that she's a lady. And the guy, we were talking about this earlier, but the professor at Vanderbilt wrote to O'Connor about this and said, a lot of my students, about half of my students, think that the grandmother's a witch. And the other half think that she's not, disagree completely. She's even got a cat, which I'll get to in a second. And the guy, O'Connor wrote back, she said, well, the ones who don't think she's a witch are the ones who have grandmothers just like her. Or great aunts just like her. And we sure did. So we've got an idea of what we're talking about here. So they're on the road. She didn't want, Pitty Sing is her cat's name. And she didn't want to leave Pitty Sing at home. Do you remember why? Anybody?
She wouldn't rub against the heaters.
Asphyxiate herself. Yeah. Now there's reason for you. So we've got grandmother's in the back seat with John Wesley and June Starr on either side of her. And Pitty Sing the cat is in a basket covered with a newspaper underneath a big valise, which is shaped like a hippopotamus's head. Okay? Driving down the road. Grandmother doesn't like this at all. She doesn't like this. The reason she's hiding the cat is because Bailey doesn't like to arrive at motels with cats, okay? And so they're driving down the road, and grandmother gets caught between the two kids in a fight. Kids are in a fight and whacking at each other and stuff like that. And she's getting bored, and she's dozing off and being awakened by her own snoring. And then finally she decides that she looks up, and when she wakes up, and she looks, and they just passed a dirt road turn off. And she, whoa, she says, that is, there's a Civil War mansion down that dirt road, and we should go see it. And Bailey said, no, it's ridiculous, out of the question. She gets the kids riled up, and they start kicking the seats and screaming, we want to go see the mansion. We want to go see. John Wesley wants to go in the right. Oh, she told them that when Sherman came through, they hid their valuables. And John Wesley wants to, he said, you all go in the front door and distract them, and I'll go around the back and sneak in the window and get the valuables. And Bailey's going, I sympathize with Bailey. You cut it out. We all just shut up. So finally he backs up, turns down the dirt road to go to this place, this mansion that she wants to see, plantation. and they go over hill and over dale. And one thing O'Connor likes to do and does in both these stories is that she warns you. She's already warned you when grandmother said, if there's an accident and I find you dead on the road. But she warns you with this description, and it does it in a lot of her stories. The sky is clear and blue, and there are no clouds and no sun. And you know with O'Connor, shit's gonna happen.
The Gothic.
Yeah, no, really. So they're driving down the road, and they turn off this dirt road, and she realizes when they turn off that the plantation that she was going to tell them to go see was not in Georgia, but in Tennessee. And she does this and disturbs the cat. Cat jumps up in the air, grabs Bailey Boy by the neck, and latches onto his neck like a caterpillar. And
bam. So the car tumbles, everyone goes flying, and the grandmother is horrified that she may be found out. And just then, a car approaches, driving very slowly, and 3 men get out with guns. Yes, hearse-like, yes, thank you. And it is the misfit, which is sort of unbelievable, yet it is the misfit. And he sends the people 2 by 2 out to be shot by the other guys in the woods, and the misfit and the grandmother are left to have this exchange. And so we know that, I wonder if we should read the exchange. Should we do that? Should we do that?
If you have a collected, it's on page 131. If you've got a source of any kind.
So as people are being hauled off and shot, the grandmother is entreating the misfit to pray. She keeps saying, pray, pray, pray.
There was a piercing scream from the woods, followed closely by a pistol report. Does it seem right to you, lady, that one is punished to eat and another ain't punished at all? The misfit says.
Jesus, the old lady cried, you've got good blood. I know you wouldn't shoot a lady. I know you come from nice people. Pray, Jesus, you ought not to shoot a lady. I'll give you all the money I've got.
Lady, the misfit said, looking beyond her farm to the woods, there never was a body to give the undertaker a tip. There were 2 more pistol reports, and the grandmother raised her head like a parched old turkey hen, crying for water, and cried, Bailey boy, as if her heart was break. Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead, the misfit said, and he shouldn't have done it. He's throwing everything off balance. If he did what he said, then there's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then there's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you got left the best way you can. By killing somebody, or burning down his house, or doing some other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness, he said, and his voice became almost a snarl.
Maybe he didn't raise the dead, the old lady mumbled, not knowing what she was saying and feeling so dizzy that she sank down in the ditch with her legs twisted under her.
I wasn't there, so I can't say he didn't. I wished I had been there. He hits the ground with his fist. It ain't right. It ain't right I wasn't there, because if I had been there, I would have known. Listen, lady, he said in a high voice, if I had been there, I would have known, and I wouldn't be like I am now. His voice seemed about to crack, and the grandmother's head cleared for an instant. She saw the man's face twisted close to her own, as if he were going to cry, and she murmured, why, you're one of my babies. You're one of my own children. She reached out and touched him on the shoulder. The misfit sprang back as if a snake had bitten him and shot her 3 times through the chest. Then he put his gun down on the ground, took off his glasses, and began to clean them. Should we go ahead and finish it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Hiram and Bobby Lee returned from the woods, and they shot the baby and the mom and the 2 children and baby boy. Returned from the woods and stood over the ditch looking down at the grandmother, who half sat and half lay in a puddle of blood with her legs crossed under her like a child's, and her face smiling up at a cloudless sky. without his glasses. The misfit's eyes were red-rimmed and pale and defenseless looking. "Take her off and throw away your thumb," the other, she said, picking up the cat and rubbing itself against his leg. "She was a talker, wasn't she?" Bobby Lee said, sliding down the ditch with a yodel. "She would have been a good woman," the misfit said, "if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life." "So fun," Bobby Lee said. "Shut up, Bobby Lee. It's no pleasure. It's no real pleasure in life."
So, just bad luck for the family, or is there anything else going on here? You know, what are your impressions? What were your reactions as you read that crazy ending? Anyone? Yeah.
I sort of feel like it's law of attraction, you know, that the grandmother ends up with him. Because like in my own mind, like I have a housekeeper / babysitter at my house who is the grandmother. And I start to become the misfit sometimes around her because I just want to shut up, just stop talking, stop giving me this bullshit. Like I can't even handle it anymore, you know? And if I could create a character that would be the perfect antithesis for this blabbering platitudes and just fake Pollyanna, you know, it would be the misfit who just comes and doesn't give a shit, you know, and just likes to be mean. You know, that's like the perfect person to just show her place. You know, I'm talking from someone who hates, I don't like this kind of personality. I really hate it, okay?
Right. The vanity, the hypocritical.
The unwillingness to just call a spade and have to just create voluminous fiction all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
The life of manners.
I can't stand it. So
Pretense and puffery.
yeah.
And O'Connor calls her hypocritical in a letter. We talked about that this afternoon, and I didn't see this hypocritical until Hallie brought up.
Oh, right. Well, when I first read this story, I didn't think anything about theology. And it wasn't until I read Mystery and Manners, which is O'Connor's, a collection of essays, where O'Connor writes about her own work, that that she revealed another way of interpreting the story. Mind you, O'Connor says repeatedly in her work, in her writing about her own work and about literature in general, that interpretations of a text a text isn't good unless it continues to sort of unfold in front of you with deeper and deeper meaning each time you read something. And so, you know, just because O'Connor writes in Mystery and Manners about what her thoughts about theology have to do with this story doesn't mean that any other interpretations aren't valid. They are. They're valid and important, blah, blah, blah. But I just wanted to bring to you guys what I've read about what she has to say about this essay.
She was strictly convinced Roman Catholic. Convinced, totally. Any theological views contrary to Roman Catholicism, to Paul VI, were to her total anathema. Total anathema.
And she writes about her writing being an effort to articulate the grace of God. And so, read in this context, the ending of A Good Man Is Hard to Find has a moment of grace at the end. But let me read just this one quote. This is from O'Connor's letters. "I think there is no suffering greater than what is caused by the doubts of those who want to believe. I know what torment this is, but I can only see it, in myself anyway, as the process by which faith is deepened. A faith that just accepts is a child's faith, and all right for children. But eventually you have to grow religiously, as every other way, though some never do. What people don't realize is how much religion costs. They think faith is a big electric blanket, when of course it is the cross. It is much harder to believe than not to believe. If you feel you can't believe, you must at least do this: keep an open mind, keep it open toward faith, keep wanting it, keep asking for it, and leave the rest to God. And I don't come at this text as a religious person. I'm not religious at all. So to try to understand what she's trying to do with grace and with faith in her stories is really, really confusing to me, frankly. But yeah, and the violence. Like, so if there is a moment of grace in this essay, I mean, in this story, is it really right in that moment of killing the grandmother?
Or is it the grandmother's moment of grace?
That's the moment of grace.
Oh yeah, yeah. So say more. What?
Moment.
So what is the moment of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Which is
so
what-
she realizes in the sense that he's one of her children.
Oh, absolutely.
As
But you know, O'Connor said, and I don't know where, so I apologize. She said that it's the writer's job to take the reader by the hand, walk him up to the edge of the mystery of existence, let go his hand, and back up. And I think that's what she does in this one. I mean, they're so, I'll never forget the first time I read it. Sorry, Heather.
Oh no, it's okay, it's okay. So in that exchange between the misfit and the grandmother, I mean, the question that I'm trying to focus on is, what sense can be made of the violence? To what end is it used?
well, Misfit's right. Bad things happen to. The punishment never does fit the crime, and we see this on the world. And how do you reconcile this? And I guess one thing, if you have a moment of grace, spouses get Alzheimer's. I mean, bad things happen. How do you react to that? I think that's the faith. Moments of grace.
Is he literally her child?
No.
O'Connor insists that he is.
Oh, really?
She does. And I read it, I studied it and read it and taught it with kids for many years. And I told the kids, write this down.
Well, you really didn't get along with Bailey.
Yeah, no, I thought it was symbolic or, a general thing. No, O'Connor insisted that's her boy.
How do you know she's not being Mother Mary and he's Jesus? Is that?
Well, how so?
So
The
your
misfits,
boy,
Jesus.
that she's delusional at this point. She's frightened. She's in shock. And she was with her Catholic being defining her.
Well, she's got to be out of the bullshit.
How do you deal with that? Here's an interruption. Lou's bodyguard just arrived. His name's Al Klaus. Dr. Al Klaus. Dr. Al Klaus. Yeah. He's also our bouncer for this year.
I love these women hugging me.
I'm not gonna. Okay, my whole opinion of you is not.
I'm sorry, but I have to tell you one thing. I don't think everybody knows. Lou is co-captain of Hawken's first undefeated football team. And Lou has the biggest shoe size of anyone. Continue.
Thanks, Al. We were just talking about grace.
Okay, well, did you guys get the handout come around to you guys? I'll read the first one and then the second one. These are from her letters, which are collected in a book called The Habit of Being. This notion that grace is healing omits the fact that before it heals, it cuts with the sword Christ said he came to bring. So that moment where, you know, if the grandmother is seen to have a moment of grace when she says, you are my child, whether she means it literally or not, it doesn't really matter, but it's a moment of connection where she connects to the suffering of the misfit when he describes the difficulty that he has in understanding, you know, well, I didn't see what Christ did, so why should I believe in him, you know? When I just lost my, where did I go?
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay. Well, so she's describing, so that's a moment of grace that she experiences, yet she gets killed right afterwards. So what good is that moment of grace? But I think that's the type of religion that she's describing, and that's the type of reality that she's describing. And she's in the next quote, which I'll read aloud, it I think handles it more directly. Grace, to the Catholic way of thinking, can and does use as its medium the imperfect, purely human, and even hypocritical, like the grandmother. Cutting yourself off from grace is a very decided manner, requiring a real choice, active will, and affecting the very ground of the soul. The misfit is touched by the grace that comes through the old lady when she recognizes him as her child, as she has been touched by the grace that comes through him in his particular suffering. His shooting her is a recoil, a horror at her humanness, but after he has done it and cleaned his glasses, the grace has worked in him, and he pronounces his judgment. She would have been a good woman if he had been there every moment of her life to shoot her. It's crazy. True enough, in the Protestant view, I think grace and nature don't have much to do with each other. The old lady, because of her hypocrisy and humanness and banality, couldn't be a medium for grace. In the sense that I see things the other way, I'm a Catholic writer. So it's interesting.
There's a
That last 2 sentences.
It's just a Catholicism.
It's
The
what?
only way- Sure, in the Protestant view, I think grace and nature don't have much to do with each other. What's that mean? This is an honest question.
I think,
Have to do with it.
Pardon?
What does nature have to do with it?
I don't understand.
Well, I'm just wondering, the difference between faith and works kind of idea. And in the Catholic faith, grace is manifested through humanity, and as all human beings are limited and fallible, which was called original sin, grace is going to come through that imperfection. And I think, and I could be wrong because I don't have a lot of familiarity with the Protestant tradition, but I think with the Protestant tradition, you know, good people doing good works can be kind of rewarded by grace to some degree.
Grace is the unmerited kindness and love of God, the undeserved and unmerited kindness and love. I think in all religions, isn't it? Anybody want to?
well, in Catholicism, I think the sacraments are moments of grace, but you can have the sacraments every Sunday. You have Eucharist, and there is maybe certain modality toward that. It's not.
But also in the Catholic tradition, there's the concept of amazing grace too, where you can have a breakthrough, as she said, in a very dark place. You know, when you're in a really very dark place, your back is to the wall, you're in a state of despair. Sometimes you can have a profound spiritual experience that is an actual experience of grace.
She knows
an ecstatic
she knows
experience,
she's gonna die.
right? And she reaches out to him.
She's wearing clean underwear.
Right.
Well, I just didn't. I don't understand the business with this.
But I mean, part of this has to do with the fact that she was a Catholic in a very Protestant South, and very much feeling like a minority in that sense. She developed a very close relationship with Alan Tate, and
Flannery O'Connor.
this is Flannery O'Connor, and there was another guy involved, Maritain, who was a kind of spiritual theological writer who wrote a book called The Range of Reason. And what he was looking to do was to try to find that. So this kind of goes back to the first story, Good Country People. In one of the things that that Holga exclaims, "We are not our own light," was a reference to another theologian, Malebranche, who she references. Malebranche actually was citing Augustine in this moment, and Malebranche's whole theological premise was trying to synthesize Augustine and Descartes. That is, explaining the value of religion by way of reason, which is a pretty flawed argument from the beginning, but reconstitutive one. I mean, it was an attempt to kind of join two traditions and push forward in a way that preserved both. And he got into a very public feud with another theologian and was kind of brushed under the carpet in some ways.
Was that Heidegger?
The Heidegger quote comes later. It wasn't. It was a man named O'Brien or something like that. So what this points to is Flannery O'Connor's immersion in a kind of scholastic tradition in which theology was discussed. It was talked about and written about as if it were real, as if it had a real impact on salvation, on daily practice, on the pathway to a kind of enlightenment. And so her conversations and the fact that she brings up when the mother in Good Country People opens a book of the daughters, she opens to a quote that she recoils from. It's almost as if it's a demonic incantation, and it's Heidegger, who's come to be known as a nihilist, as someone who is after the nothing that exists behind everything, right? Which is more of a spiritual endeavor than people have given him credit for. But and so she recoils from that in some way because the nothing is so scary. But what Heidegger was really after was approaching the nothing, right? That is the thing that exists, nothing with a capital N, that thing which exists and kind of orchestrates the world behind this illusion of reality, to approach the nothing through dread. So this is that kind of uncanny moment, right? That feeling of the fantastic, of the uncanny that Freud wrote so much about, as an attempt, as a kind of substitution for a spiritual or theological tradition that Heidegger saw as corrupt and bankrupt, right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm just kind of curious here. You mentioned there, we are not alone light.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wonder if that's a concept of imminence versus transcendence. And then within Catholicism, it's a religion of person to person. So there's a certain comfort in it.
Right. It's mediated.
And God has a face,
right?
A human face.
Right.
Whereas when you go beyond that to the nothingness, you don't have that comforting human, personification to sort of hold on to.
Right.
You talked about that in your letters.
So that would be nearly more of a Dark Night of the Soul, John of the Cross type thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
One of the things about this story that I found out about a long time ago that interested me is that in the early 1950s, psychologists and social commentators and people like that were beginning to say, it's the beginning of people saying, pure evil, human evil does not exist. It's society's fault that it raises these people this way. The misfit is not evil because he's evil. He's evil because he found himself in prison and he didn't know what the charges had anything to do with what he did, and so on and so on. O'Connor said bullshit. She didn't say bullshit. She never did. But she said no. evil is out there. In the original issue of this story, there was an epigraph that said, I forget what it was, but it's waiting at the roadside for you. It was a figure of evil, an anthropomorphic figure of evil. And she is saying here, it does exist, you know, and it's not a social problem. I mean, it is a social problem, but it's not caused by social.
But it's surmountable in some ways, or there's something valuable to be found in the broken, the suffering, you know, and it is that kind of moment of grace, and which got me thinking about that moment when Minus Man is pulled into the homeless guy's hole. And this might be a good transition because I felt that a similar kind of pull, I mean, that the touch, the proximity of their bodies next to each other as that act is committed.
The intimacy.
Right, the intimacy of murder. I mean, it was a fascinating thing. So maybe on that note, we could turn over.
Very nice.
Well, I go. I consider Flannery O'Connor to have been an influence in my work, even though, like all of us who have been talking about her tonight, did not share her religious convictions. I first read O'Connor when I was in college with the Wise Blood in the American Lit class. I, on my own initiative, got to the stories, including the two we've been discussing here tonight. And of course, I also read The Habit of Being, which I think is, as I said to Peter, some of the finest writing she's ever done is in her letters.
Was she raised in Georgia?
Yep.
And these stories, when were they written? In terms of, when did she pen them in?
Late 40s, 50s, and early 60s.
Yeah, she went to Yale, which is a writer's community.
And when she went to the University of Iowa.
And she went to the University of Iowa, the writer's workshop. At the time, Robert Giroux, FS&G, Farrar, Strauss, and Giroux, was the guy at Yale. And he said, apocryphally, I think, I'm not sure, but he said when he first interviewed her, he couldn't understand her because her accent was so bad. She had to write stuff down. That sounded a bit much to me, but because I've heard her read, and she's not that bad, but this would be so, she was 21 when she was at Yale, and she was 39 when she died in 64, so. Any math people here?
Really? 18 years?
That's the question of the years.
Is it all late 40s?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Well, no, into the late 50s. 63. Revelation was published in 63 or 63. So, yeah.
He was a professor who had to read her stories aloud and wouldn't let her read aloud.
Who was he? Is that what you said?
Yeah, the one before she went to Iowa.
Giroux was?
I'm not sure if it was Giroux. There was someone who thought that she was just the best he'd ever seen, but he couldn't understand her, and he wouldn't let her read aloud.
Yeah, no, I heard that story. And she had to submit at a table like this in the writing school. She had to submit questions in writing. I don't know. Have you ever listened to her read sometime?
It's
But he also pointed out she's the one who created the words like gnome and arms and the southern way of writing that really reflected how they spoke.
Summers. Yeah, introduced myself. Sorry, Lou.
Okay. And directly.
Correctly.
Directly.
So yeah, if you're really into O'Connor, the Library of Americans anthology has just about everything. And, there it is. Amazon, very cheap. It's a great way to get a concentrated place. So I really hadn't revisited O'Connor since being here in college and the years after that. And I was thinking this afternoon about what is different in my reaction to her writing now than it was then. And I know that she was a Southern writer. I know that religion was supposedly her subject matter. But I think Flannery O'Connor had concluded that the world needs saving, and that her stories were kind of the bill of particulars in the reason for the world needing saving. And in the 50 years or so since she died, we've got that all sorted out. So there's really no need any longer for a writer. I do. Yeah, no. But I wonder what she'd think of ISIS.
I wonder what she thought of the Holocaust in terms of faith and finding something meaningful or full of grace there.
Or in the lynchings that occurred throughout the South
Sure.
in the years when she was writing.
Yeah.
What attracted me at the time to her writing when I first read her was her blending comic and naturalistic and fantastical elements into something that made sense in its own terms. It felt true, it was deep, mysterious, jagged, lyric, muscular, it was hilarious, and it was cruel. And these are the things about her that meant a lot to me at the time, and still do. She was an inspiration in a number of ways. I feel about inspiration that you treat it like a buffet table. You take what you want and you leave what doesn't mean that much to you. She would have objected to that, I think, in the things that I left behind. But I'd like to talk about three things that I took from her writing. First is that misfits are more interesting than people who fit in. And I come by that honestly for personal reasons. Specifically, at the age of 7, I began to suffer seizures and was diagnosed with epilepsy. And so I spent a lot of time as a child fretting about what was going wrong inside of me. And I felt sort of damaged and like a misfit. And because it was a visible and public illness, and one's classmates are not the kindest in 4th grade or 3rd grade.
What about Al?
Well, Al didn't come along until later and become a little bit more well-defended. Thank God. But I grew up believing myself to be kind of effective, and became interested in characters who were also likewise damaged, badly behaving. I've been drawn to write about people or things that frighten me, and so my bad occipital lobe wiring took an outward focus towards bad pathology. And the idea that Flannery O'Connor was writing about these kinds of things was an affirmation of what to me at times felt like an impulsive preoccupation. And, diversity loves company. The characters rowing her fiction were pleasing to me in the sense that they took pleasure in meanness. And my character in The Minus Man is a psychopath who's wired to take pleasure from poisoning people.
But he's not mean.
I made him a poisoner rather than someone
really
who
nice.
dismembered. He's
He's
bland.
polite. He's thoughtful.
Well,
He's not mean.
Why is it not?
Well, I think that's.
I read one of your reviews, the Observer said he was actually a friendly poisoner. And that's what he is. He's like, not a jerk.
Oh, that's nice.
He's not a psychopath, but he's not an asshole.
well, thank God for that.
Seems like an
I think that makes it more frightening.
Sounds like someone who
It's
can
much
fit
more
in.
frightening, yeah, because you can't figure it out. He's more friendly when he's so nice.
That's right.
You know what? I've had to poison people because I felt like if he stabbed them or strangled them or cut them up into little pieces, it would be very hard for readers to engage with the first-person narrative that was him constantly talking at them. And so poisoning seemed to be a sort of kinder, gentler means of dispatch.
What was the poison? I couldn't tell.
Well, I made it up. My wife at the time offered to, she was a criminal defense lawyer, and she offered to get me a pathologist who could verify for me that the poison I'd invented actually existed. And I said, you know, that can only be bad thing. So,
The anarchist cookbook.
I didn't think it was crap.
One of the things that's interesting about the character of the Minus Man and is, I mean, I made him very self-aware in a fun way. I mean, if you're going to spend time listening to a guy's voice, he has to have something insightful to say. And I think one of the flaws of the book may be that this is an unreasonable use of unreasonableness, to use a phrase O'Connor used. She said that her stories resorted to a reasonable use of the unreasonable. But I made Van be pretty insightful and observant and interesting. He's kind of almost a social commentator in a cracked way. Among his delusions is that the people he kills find their way to him because in some way they desire their own deaths. And thinking about violent grace, maybe you could say that because serial killers bring people to a moment of possible grace, they're doing God's work. That's my view.
You're just scared of shit.
Everybody walk to your cars and pay attention.
Everyone's looking at their glasses.
Fortunately, I mean, there are more than you think. You know, the Minus Man is very much a misfit. And I think, you know, what I tried to create was someone who was plausibly manifesting the things that you see in serial killers. They didn't do a ton of research, but I'm told by people who have done a ton of research that the character I created is convincing and plausible as a serial killer. He cannot connect with other people except through taking their lives. He is impaired in that sense. He fits in by simulating behavior that he observes in other people as successful, socially successful. But he's not nice. He's a predator. And the excerpt that you all read is the most kind of really seamy example of predation in the entire book. In fact, they filmed it for the movie version of The Minus Man and cut it out because it damaged the director's notion of how, you know, bloody the character would come across.
Because of the intimacy.
Because of the intimacy and because of the starkness of the predation. I mean, it's all very calculated. And he felt that it was going to kind of undermine the rest of the film. You know, there's been a lot of conversation tonight about the humor in O'Connor. I mean, I think the line where he says, she should have had someone around to shoot her is, I mean, it's the perfect form of humor because it's true to the story and it's freaking hilarious. I mean, it really is.
Show me where your leg joins on. Does it for me?
So anyway, this kind of character intrigues me. I caused a lot of dismay within my family, as did O'Connor. She heard a lot from her relatives and fellow townspeople about her writing. I mean, my father read The Minus Man in manuscript, and he came out of the bedroom and he threw it down on the table and he yelled at me for letting him get away. It was tough weather.
What about your aunt?
And my cousin Grace said, "Oh, Louis, why can't you write something cheerful?"
Oh. Hopewell, sorry, Mrs. Hopewell.
Good to hear you, Jane.
Mrs. Hopewell, what did
Mrs.
you
Hopewell.
cherry? Yeah, pass.
You are-
So my first novel is a book called Mountain State, and that is, that's a book in which I see the main character as a kind of fragmental version of Hazel Motes in Wise Blood. He's a kind of bizarre drifter who lives his life in an accidental kind of way, and he runs away from home at an early age and follows some itinerant musicians to Fort Wayne, Indiana, steals a family photograph from a fellow boarder in a rooming house, and is sent to prison for a month. And when he gets out, he runs off and joins a circus and becomes an elephant handler. And in the fullness of time, he develops a deep attachment to the elephant. It's the most emotionally satisfying relationship he's ever had in his life. But they have Chloe.
That's the old.
That's the elephant. I named my black lab after the elephant. And they have fallen out and both come to a very bad end. And that's what disturbs my family.
Is that why Ringling Brothers is getting rid of elephants?
Yes. So yeah, that.
I'm going to take questions.
Be happy to.
Questions of any of us? Anybody?
Sure. Are there any similarities between, and I apologize in advance, to the exception of reading The Minus Man homework. I failed. But are there
Good for you.
similarities between Harper Lee and the timing of her writing, and presumably she's from the South, and the Flannery O'Connor character, and also, how many women were writing at the time and were as significant in sort of their success? And here are two women, and are there any similarities, or are they very different characters? And I'm also sort of taken by True Detective and the nature of the misfit. I don't know if you saw the series, but the South, the religious connotations, and the misfit, and the Flannery O'Connor characters.
Well, there was another female Southern writer working at the time, Eudora Welty, who, I don't know, what do you think, how would you compare the two? Welty is so much better.
Kinder to the acid character. It's about the same time, right?
It is.
About the same time.
And, and O'Connor complained, and she said, when you're a Southern writer at this time, with Faulkner working, and you don't want to get your mule and wagon to stall on the railroad tracks when the Dixie Limited is coming along. And what she meant was that, Faulkner's writer, and we're not, kind of thing. But I think she and Welty both shine as brightly as Faulkner did. I don't know what you think.
I think one of the interesting things I feel when I'm reading O'Connor is I don't feel her gender.
Mhm.
Good point.
Mhm.
Don't feel her gender.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel,
Yeah.
I mean, she is
Whereas with
as,
wealthy you do.
Right.
yeah, she is as raw as you.
Mhm.
And the things she writes about are universal. So I
Wouldn't want to piss her off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to piss her
Oh,
off.
God, in the letters, there's one letter where she hates to be misinterpreted, but she also hates interpretation.
Right.
Scholastic activity. She gets a letter from some teacher in high school and sends a letter back elegantly berating him for being kind of coming to bad conclusions about her work. And then she sends that letter off and thinks better of it and sends him a letter apologizing for having been so harsh. And in the letter, after apologizing, she gets all harsh on him.
On this sheet, there's an excerpt from one of those letters to a teacher who irritated her with the letter, and it was a teacher who said, "Well, we all think that good man is hard to find is about Bailey having a dream." You remember that one? And so she writes back, Bailey's only importance is as the grandmother's boy and the driver of the car. It is the grandmother who first recognizes the misfit and who is most concerned with him throughout. The story is a duel of swords between the grandmother and her superficial beliefs, and the misfit's more profoundly felt involvement with Christ's action, which sets the world off balance for him. And then she has a line that I didn't include in there afterwards that's something like, any other, I have no earthly idea how you came up with your theory.
She also had a letter to a friend of hers where she said that I Am Rand was worse than Nick's line. Her picture was worse than his.
Throw her books in the garbage. She's pretty clear about that. She really is.
I came across one letter in which I didn't read very carefully, but it referred to Harper Lee. And she was saying something like, well, I've heard, she's down here, around here, whatever. Well, that's really just a child's book. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll stick around for questions if you have any, but Matthew's going to tell you about the food for the veterans. You know that for Emily Dickinson, we had New England clam chowder. Mm-hmm. And for Tim O'Brien in Vietnam, we had pho. And for tonight, we have...
Flannery liked shrimp, and so we have some coconut breaded shrimp, and she loved peppermint chiffon pie. And I have a number of peppermint chiffon pies out here, and then a big pot of gumbo. And I'll go bring out a little more. Feel free to stick around and eat up.
By the side of the road, almost visible. And there was a theory the police had that the killings were done by the Green River killer, having migrated from California to Massachusetts. So the first chapter of Minus Man is about the journey, and I intended it just to be a short story. But by the time I got to the end of the chapter, I was addicted to the voice of the killer.
So speaking of voices, how do you choose the person to read your books if you're doing it on Amazon or whatever, Kindle audiobooks or whatever? Do you choose the people who read your books?
No, nobody's ever read it.
Oh, and you need to read them out loud?
Right.
Yes, on audiobooks.
No, that's an experience I've yet to have.
Because I'm a big audiobook person. The problem, of course, with audiobooks is that you can't go back to your pages or whatever, so I usually buy the book along with listening to it. But when you hear what I would think that the author is trying to convey in that voice, in that tone, in that pause, in that whatever, it makes it deeper. And I've heard certainly authors write or read their own stories, which is amazing. But I was just wondering if you were involved at all with that. I guess not.
I haven't been, but I do have a friend who listened to all of the Harry Potter books and claims that the reader for the Harry Potter
That's
books
great.
is extraordinary.
Great.
Excellent.
Who is it?
And I coach them at Carpet.
Yeah. So it makes a huge difference. Yeah. And I don't know who does the casting.
So I think you double dip because I get you both, in the Minds Band, and then when you finally get it on audiobooks, I'll be listening to that too.
Listen to Flannery O'Connor.
I will.
Yeah, I'd love to listen.
She reads it at Vanderbilt in '59.
Oh.
And the audience, of course, is Southern. And man, they howl through, laugh their buns off through the whole thing. And all the stuff that you and I might smirk at, or maybe even giggle a little bit, but these people are howling. It's all about the grandmother.
Oh, yeah.
All about yeah, and you should hear it. She's got this really high voice, but she doesn't have a deep accent. I don't know what Giroux thing is to get popular.
Blue, when was Minus Made published?
91. The movie came out in 1999. It had an amazing cast. Owen Wilson played the killer.
On Netflix?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. It shows up on cable.
I think so. I think we need a fun night of watching.
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
I was in it.
Were you really?
I was a victim.
Nice.
The victim of your own poison.
Who directed?
Huh?
Who directed?
A fascinating guy named Hampton Fancher, who was the screenwriter for Blade Runner.
Okay.
Mm.
Wow.
This is the first movie he directed. He's written screenplays before.
Did you write the screenplay or did
No, he wrote
he
it.
adapted it?
I actually, I've written a sequel to Minus Man, which is not the reason I let him get away.
But that helps.
Keeps the door open a little bit.
And Hampton has read it. He thinks it should be packaged as a cable TV.
Oh, cool.
Like True Detectives, just like
Yeah.
6 episodes?
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, you have
Sounds
a
like
daughter in this? The character Van has a daughter that starts out before you really get into the meat of this? And then it also talks about detectives interviewing him. So was he caught even though he gets away
No,
again?
he fantasizes. They're imaginary.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in that extra.
Is his daughter imaginary in the room next to him?
No, the daughter's not his daughter. The daughter is the daughter of the people for whom he rents his room. Jane was played by Mercedes Ruehl, and Doug was played by Brian Cox.
When you had Lyle Lovett in the movie, right?
Yeah.
No, not Lyle Lovett, Dwight Yoakam.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I love it.
He's coming to town.
He played the president.
We're Julia Roberts for about 2 minutes.
Yes.
Is it painful to have somebody screenplay your work, or is it,
Yeah.
or is it, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just.
I liked, well, first of all, he had a crappy relationship with the Blade Runner guy. I'm blanking on his name.
Ridley Scott.
No, not the director, the
Harrison.
author of To Android's Dream.
Philip Dick.
Philip K. Dick, yeah. He didn't get along with Philip K. Dick, and he felt that it was his fault. So he really wanted me to like what he was doing. So
That's
I
great.
had a lot of input.
That's great.
I mean, I would have directed a different movie than he did, but I liked what he did with it. He had a clue. He definitely did.
That's great.
And it was
Lucky.
fun. It was really fun.
What was your grading experience at home?
Oh, well, I mean, I went to university school, Yeah, I didn't have a good time at university school. I felt it was, well, let me be blunt, I was bullied as a kid. I started in 3rd grade, left Academy.
It's in the book.
Yeah, I saw that in the book, I read it.
Huh?
It's in our book, here,
Oh, yeah.
all the rest.
Right.
Did you write about that?
Yeah, I did. I did it, and when I got to Hawken, I didn't know what to expect, but it was a much more encouraging environment for somebody of my temperament and my background. And it was possible to write something and have it be a little offbeat and not have it be frowned on. And I felt always very, very encouraged by Hawken to write, to stretch, to try to do new things. And I've been running a writing competition at Hawken for the last 30, almost, probably more than 30 years, in memory of my late brother. And I've been so impressed by the quality of the writing that comes out of Hawken students. Prose, poetry. Usually what I try to do is give a prize for a poem and a prize for a story, a poem or series of poems, and a prize for a prose piece. And it doesn't have to be fiction, it could be creative nonfiction, which they're doing a lot more of these days.
I had the reverse experience. I started in 3rd grade at Hawken and went to university school in 8th grade. And one of the, probably the teachers that had the most profound impact on my education were at Hawken and Cal through college or later. But I'll never forget this woman, Martha Brown. And so we started our 7th grade year. His name was Mr. Colton. And he sort of mysteriously disappeared after about 2 weeks. And Martha Brown came. She was just phenomenal. And apparently Mr. Colton had a little drinking problem that when you're in 7th grade, you don't really notice that, but you hear about it. But Martha Brown was just fabulous.
She'll be back in May. She's coming back in May, so.
She's coming back.
Wow.
I submitted a short story to the McCreary Prize every year for about 13 years. Never. Thanks, folks.
Great. Thanks, everybody.